Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we start New Gate episode 3. In last episode we see Shin defeat giant 2 foxes and save Element Tail. And now further New Gate episode 3. We see Shin surprise that fox so small because Elementalas are usually colossal. Shin decides to take the fox as his companion. Meanwhile, Isni receives a magic letter from Tiara, and she wonders how Tiara got her hands on such a magic item. She opens the letter, and she's surprised by its contents. Meanwhile, Shin is returning to the guild, and he decides to report the incident once he gets back, because he didn't expect that many skull faces to spawn. Shin decides to form a partnership with the Elemental Tail, because Shin doesn't want the guild to know about the fox. He decides to tame the fox by forming a partnership with it, which will hide its level and species, so they can always stay together. The fox agrees to the partnership, and Shin initiates the partnership by saying the contract's words. A symbol appears on both their arms, and Shin decides to name the fox, which makes the fox very happy. Shin wonders if the fox would like to be named Yusuha, and from its reaction Shin can tell that it's content with its new name. Shin suddenly gets a notification from the game. System showing he has a new message. He opens the message, sent by Tiara, who's informing him that she was able to send a message to her master, which surprises Shin because he didn't think Tiara would be able to teach Shni. Shin responds, telling her to say hi to Shni on his behalf, and he decides to head to the guild with Yusuha. Shin arrives at the guild to see the twin sisters at the reception desk. He tells them he has something to report to the guild, and they both urge him to go ahead. He wonders who he should respond to, and they both insist that he can report to them. Celica tells Silica to back off, because she's in the prime position to take Shin's report since he's standing in front of her. Silica wonders why Silica won't let her take Shin's report, and she realizes that Silica is acting strange because she's never acted like this before. Silica insists that she can't take Shin's report, and Silica concedes, and decides to keep quiet while Silica takes Shin's report. Shin gives Silica his report, after which she proceeds to the request board. Glad that he's gotten that out of his chest, Shin decides to use that opportunity to check out other jobs, and Yuzua points out a request that stands out to it. Shin goes through the request, and he sees that someone is looking for a skill successor. He wonders if the term means the person is a special skill holder. He realizes the request is unique because it's unranked and that it's from the church orphanage. He decides to take up the request since he is already heading to the orphanage to see Millie because he's curious about how she knew the fox was in danger. Shin arrives at the church orphanage, and he's awestruck by the complexity and beauty of its architecture. A nun draws his attention, wondering what he's doing in the church, and he apologizes for just standing and staring. He informs her that he has some business with the orphanage, and she wonders if he saw her request on the request board. Shin tells her I came to see what the request was about, and he also wonders if Millie stayed there. The nun wonders why he asked about Millie, and Shin tells her that she gave him a special request to help her out with something. She decides to lead him to Millie's room, who welcomes him warmly as soon as he enters. The nun realizes he's not a bad person, and Shin wonders why she had such an impression of him before. The nun apologizes because it has been a long time since Millie took a liking to someone. Shin introduces himself as an adventurer, and the nun of the church introduces herself as Tria. Shin wonders if he can ask Millie about what he said earlier, and Tria gives him her approval. Shin asks Millie if Yuzuha was the fox she wanted him to save, and she confirms that he saved the right fox. She thanks him for saving it, but he informs her that Yuzuha is giving her its thanks because he wouldn't have saved it without her information. Shin decides to question Tria about her request, and she realizes that he must have a skill since he was interested in it. Shin confesses that he has a skill because skill holders were very common in the game, but he figures out that they're a lot rarer now. Tria informs him that she's trying to learn a specific skill, and she needs someone who inherited that skill to teach it to her. Shin wonders if she needs a healing skill given her profession, but she informs him that she wants to learn the purifying skill because other things are at play besides her profession. Shin is surprised by this, and even Tria knows that she's asking for a lot. Shin informs her that it would be tough to teach, and Tria reads between the lines and figures out that Shin can teach it. She wonders if she'll be willing to fulfill the request by teaching her the skill, and Shin informs her that it all depends on her. Tria thinks Shin is referring to the reward for the request, but Shin informs her that he wants information about Millie's power in return for his services. Shin also tells her he wants her to tell him about any information the church receives, but he knows that she won't give him such information freely. Shin had the choice to ask her so. He could use the church as an intel source since he knew so little about the new world. Millie tells Tria that Shin is a good person, and Tria decides to accept his terms, but she informs him that they can't gather much information for him because they're no experts. Shin tells her he just wants to know if anyone comes to the church and says anything of interest. He tells her he's more interested in Millie's powers anyway, and Tria tells him Millie possesses the Star Composer title. This title makes her have unexpected visions which have never been wrong, and Shin realizes that she can predict the future. Nun figures out that Millie could be in danger if people found out about her powers, and Tria informs him that they've taken measures to keep her powers a secret. Shin tells her that she's more interested in Millie's powers anyway, and Tria tells him that they've taken measures to keep her powers a secret. She informs him of an adventurer who assists them to keep Millie safe, and Shin realizes she's talking about Avis. Shin decides to accept the request, and he wonders if Tria will be the one learning the skill. She tells him she wants one of her sisters to learn it because their former priest has a granddaughter, and things would go smoothly if she inherited the church. While the children are fawning over Yusuha, Shin is bummed out that none of them are taking a shine to him. He wonders why Millie isn't with the other children, and she tells him she won't be able to let Yusuha because they're bigger than her. Yusuha suddenly runs over to Shin, and Millie calls her over so she can have the fox all to herself. Shin figures out that Millie used her powers to bring Yusuha over, but when he tries to say hi to the children, they disappear faster than the speed of light. A child comes up to him wondering if he's the one who'll save them, because authorities wanted to get rid of the orphanage. Shin asks her for more details, and she tells him a new priest has to take over the church, since it currently doesn't have one. Shin wonders why Tria can't get rid of the orphanage, and she informs him that the successor must be someone who can use a special skill. Shin realizes that's why Tria wants to learn the Purify skill, and the child informs him that the former priest's granddaughter may have a higher claim to the church than the new priest, if she learns the Purify skill. Shin now understands why Tria wants someone else to learn the skill, but he wonders why a priest of the church would want to do away with the orphanage. The child informs him that they don't like him because he only cares about money, and that's enough information to give Shin a profile of the priest. Millie assures the children that Shin will be their savior, and the child feels reassured. Shin asks the child if Millie is always right, and she informs him that Millie always knew where they could get good deals and where the sweets were hidden. Though that wasn't what Shin was asking, he concludes that Millie has to be more careful about the things she shares with others. Millie wonders if she's using her powers weirdly, but Shin reassures her that she's using it for good. Shin gives a head pat, and all the children suddenly want head pats. Tria comes out of the church, thanking Shin for waiting, but she sees him surrounded by the children who are using him as their pillow. Tria tells Lasha to introduce herself to Shin, but Lasha messes up her speech and Shin wonders if she's alright. Tria informs him that she's a bit careless despite being hardworking, and Shin informs her that he'll be teaching her the Purify skill. He informs her that her learning success depends on her, but he decides to ask her if she knows where large numbers of high-level undeads appear. Tria informs him that the Ghost Plains is a famous place for high-level undead, but Avis bursts into the room to see that it's Shin who took the job. Avis wonders what Shin is after, and he confesses that he's after info on Millie's power and the adventurer who helps keep her power a secret. Avis realizes Tria has spilled a lot of information, and he tells her not to be so trusting, but she reassures him that Shin is trustworthy because Millie confirmed it. Avis wonders if she saw something, and she tells him that she did. Avis has no choice but to trust Shin because Millie is a good person, and she's a good person. Millie trusts him, and Shin reassures him that their secret is safe with him. Avis promises to take Shin down if he spills anything, but Millie tells him to stop being so fussy. Tria apologizes for Avis's short temper, but Avis asks Shin to tell them about the Purify skill. He informs them that 200 undead who are over level 150 have to be defeated while holding a holy prayer orb item to obtain purification. Shin decides to weaken the monsters while Lasha takes them down because finishing blows count as a kill. Shin informs Millie that she's a good person, that he already has a holy prayer orb, which would have otherwise been difficult to obtain. Avis decides to tag along to make sure Lasha doesn't get hurt, and Tria encourages Lasha to do her best. Though Avis doesn't know much about Shin, he is certain that he's not dangerous since Millie took a liking to him, but he still wasn't sure Shin would be able to take on hundreds of monsters over level 150 while carrying Lasha, which made him suspicious of Shin. Shin leaves the church and he decides to eat and retire early since they will be heading to the plains the next day. Avis cuts him off and asks him to tag along with him because he wants to confirm if Shin is a chosen one. Shin doesn't know what he's talking about, and Avis explains that chosen ones are born with skills, titles, and knowledge they shouldn't have. Shin wonders if they also have memories of past lives, but Avis tells him they just have information about items and monsters. Shin wonders if reincarnation in the game still works because he has reincarnated before, but he wasn't born into this new world as a baby. Avis decides to stop him, and he asks him to tag along to make sure Lasha doesn't get hurt, questioning him because he can see that he is lost in thought, and he warns him to keep the information about the chosen ones a secret. Shin can't believe that people hate Avis after seeing how caring he is, especially because he protects the orphanage. Avis informs Shin that he's just trying to stop the new priest because the children's cries about the priest give him a headache. Shin secretly laughs, realizing that Avis is a nice guy. Avis notices him laughing, and he's about to pounce on him, but Shin suddenly gets a message from Tiara informing him that she received a message from Shni saying she would be returning soon. She tells him to inform her. When he leaves the kingdom, and that she's scared about the number of questions, her master asked about him. Shin suddenly gets an important message, and he takes out his introduction letter, which Avis recognizes is from the Moon Sanctum. He brings his introduction letter out to confirm the authenticity of Shin's letter, and they both can't believe they have letters from the Moon Sanctum. The next day, they arrive at the plains, and Shin hands the Holy Prayer Orb to Lasha because she has to be back in the world. Shin is so scared that he's going to have to go to the holding it. They head deep into the plains, but the undead suddenly appear, and Shin encourages Lasha to give it her all. The undeads rush at them, and Shin takes them down so Lasha can heal them, and Shin is glad the skill still works the same way as it did in the game. The next waves come at them and take out their limbs so Lasha can take them down. They move deeper and come up against a barrier, and Avis informs him that the guild put up the barrier because the undead beyond that point are at a high level. They enter the barrier, and Shin notices they have to go to the Moon Sanctum. They have some enemies around them. He tells Avis to take down those ahead of them while he takes down those to their left, leaving Yuzuha with Lasha. They take down the monsters, so Lasha can heal them. Meanwhile, Ryan is taking down high-level undead in the plains, and she realizes that it would have been tougher if she didn't have the sword that came flying into the castle. She was worried about another soldier party who was having trouble taking down a huge undead, but Shin came to their aid, taking down the monster easily. This is the end of the video. If you like video, then please like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. I see you in next episode. Until then, you watch Windbreaker showing on the screen.